So we are Fedor, Duzhin, and Joo-Seng, so from Singapore, from Nanyang Technological University. So I teach mathematics, and my colleague, Prof. Tan, he teaches business, right? So we did this together to understand how we can see what is going on within learning teams, and this is our kind of big goal, right? So here is the plan. Well, conceptually, our study is somewhat similar to the previous one. So in the sense that we collected a lot of data that probably very few people looked at before, and we just tried to see whether what we can say about learners' behavior from this data. Well, but I'm afraid that we have more questions than answers. So the big goal here is to help our students to become more effective learners, and probably to devise some pedagogical interventions that will help our students. But at the moment, we are just trying to see what we have here and just process the data, right? So now we do have quite a lot of data. So we have collected WhatsApp chats from students in 5 courses, 2 in mathematics and 3 in business. We have 79 learning teams in these courses, so 25,000 WhatsApp messages overall. So this is the summary. Yeah, note that one course is kind of special. It's course D. I don't tell you what it is because, well, to protect students' privacy. But in one of these courses, students wrote particularly long messages on average. Right? So this is special. It's going to be important later in the talk. All right. So let us look at some figures. So we have 79 learning teams, so colored by the course. In some courses, students were very active, like, I don't know, so some team wrote more than 3,000 messages, while in some courses, these learning teams were not so active. So here you can get some impression on variability of the data. Well, by student, right? So there are 5 courses again. And of course, in some courses, students wrote a lot of messages. So like about 100 messages on average. So some students were extremely active, while in some other courses, they were not so active. And this is the mean number of words per message in 5 courses. And note that this course D that was that stood out in the summary. So you see that students wrote very long messages, and there were some students whose messages were on average like more than 200 words long. So which basically means that they did not really type these messages, but probably, I don't know, inserted huge chunks from Wikipedia or from some literature. So by just looking at these charts, we can kind of understand what's going on here, and then we can just read the charts and see that yes, it is true. So that in this course, students tended to copy paste some materials from online sources. Okay, now time of the day. So some distribution of activity time. I'm not sure if we can make any conclusion from it, any actionable insight. So what is special is the this course D again, so where students on average wrote really long messages. and they were also active around midnight. I don't know. So honestly, I don't know what it means, but it probably does tell us something about their behaviors. Okay, now I will continue with kind of probably more interesting stuff where we have some findings. Well, now every point here represents one learning team, right? So this is one team.
Sorry about that. I think you can continue.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So, and then every team, they did some work together, and the end product of their work was a project report. Right? So, and the course instructor graded their project report according to some rubrics. Now, we cannot compare scores between students from different courses, right? It doesn't make sense, right? So, which is why here all these data points are colored according to the course. And I constructed 5 regression lines. So I tried to regress project score versus the response variable is the project score, and the independent variable is the number of messages per team member. Now, what we see here is that in all these teams, there is an increasing trend, right? So the more messages they write, the higher their project score is going to be in the end. So let me just emphasize that their project score is actually independent from WhatsApp chat, right? So it's a completely different thing, right? So it is not coming from WhatsApp chat, not from WhatsApp. So this WhatsApp chat is simply a means to trace the student's behavior. Okay, now, so another thing that we thought, okay, so if there is a positive correlation between the project score and the number of messages in the chat, so how about correlation between the mean length of a message, so the word count per message? And here we see some interesting pattern, right? So in some courses, students wrote very short messages on average, and in these courses, the trend seems to be increasing, right? So in other courses, students seem to write long messages on average, and the trend here seems to be decreasing, right? So in a way, we can see that, you know, when students write very short messages, they do not really engage in communication, in deep communication. And if they write very long messages, again, it's not really, doesn't lead to a high project score. So in some sense that there is something like a gold ideal length of a message that will lead to a productive communication that will let our students to earn a higher project score in the end. Now, I don't really know whether we can leverage on that and whether we can, invent some intervention to help students to become more effective, but it's something to think about. Okay, so so another thing that we did is basically, so since we are trying to study interactions, so we represented our learning teams as networks, right? So here, every little picture is one learning team in one course. So I think it is course D, but I'm not sure, I don't remember. Now, these circles represent individual students. So this is a particular student. And the thickness of an arrow from a student to a student is proportional to the number of times B's message directly follows A's message, right? So this is kind of a proxy to interaction between these students, right? So and we try to see if some kind of features of these interactions, if they can be linked to high performance or to low performance in the end. Now, and the idea is that, well, this is our logic. So our logic is that, and it is kind of common in network science to study the so-called centralization coefficient, right? So to compare centralized networks versus decentralized networks. So centralized networks is, well, a network that is 100% centralized is something where all the interaction goes just via one node. And decentralized is something like where all the interaction is evenly spread, right? And it is possible to measure it with a number, centralization coefficient, right? So, and we kind of hoped to see that the correlation is negative. So higher performance, well, lower centralization means high performance, because this is observed in some other areas of, I don't know, science and life. But it didn't work. So we cannot see it. So that there is no relation between project score and this centralization coefficient. So I tried to come up with different regressions. It doesn't really work. So this is a negative result that we see. And I will appreciate if you have any comments. I don't know why it didn't work, or any suggestions how we can update this study, or okay. Anyway, so our key findings are that there is a sort of an optimal word count. I mean, of course, it has to be taken cautiously, but it kind of seems, well, this is what we seem to have. So like the optimal word count of around, magic number is 12 words. Now, how to turn it into an intervention that can help our students to, I don't know, to learn better, I'm not sure, and I will be very glad if you have any ideas. And there is a positive correlation between intensity of discussion and the team project score, which is not surprising, and there is no visible relationship between project score and centralization of communication network. And again, I'm not sure why. So maybe if you have any ideas, I will be very glad if you have any comments or suggestions. And finally, our big goal is to understand interaction between learners and in learning teams, right? We don't really have a lot of answers here, right? So, and it is still in, although we do have some interesting findings, it is still kind of the research is still in the beginning, right? And again, so if you have any suggestions, like what other data sources that we can try to explore, so something that can come together with WhatsApp chats. And most importantly, what explains success or failure of learning teams, and how to develop interventions to help our students. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation, and I will be glad to take questions and comments and suggestions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duzhin, for your presentation. Like previous session, we already have one question coming in from Vincent Farward. If using WhatsApp, you have very little control over the application itself. Using a messaging board, you could potentially control a color code that changes the message box to green when between 10 to 15 words, or when above 30 words. That's the suggestion from this audience.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely, I agree. So WhatsApp is not catered for education, so it's just a generic generic app for communication, right? But this is what it kind of makes it popular, right? So we chose WhatsApp simply because students use WhatsApp. If we tell them to use whatever other chat or I don't know or app, maybe they just will not use it. Yeah. Although I do agree that of course it is easier to work with, I don't know, tools built in online learning management systems, but it is in our experience, students just don't use them.
There are also another suggestion from our audience that maybe you can explore the active time for WhatsApp chat.
Thank you, absolutely. I guess I'll just write it down, active.
Okay, we have one question for you too, from Maria. Did you collect any data related to the impact based on peer rating or content analysis?
Yes, we do have some data for that reflects peer rating, but it's not directly linked to our WhatsApp chat, and it is a bit of a technical challenge to link them. So the problem is that we need permission from IRB to do that, to link the two different data sources. Because so far, how we get access to our students' WhatsApp chat. So we just tell our students that, look, if you give us access to your team's WhatsApp chat, then in the end of the semester, we will have more information to be able to grade your contribution to your team fairly. So, and it is up to you whether you want to give us access or you don't want to give us access. So it's just that if you do, then we will be in a better position to give you a fair grade in the end. And some students share their WhatsApp chat with us, some don't, right? But generally, we prefer not to really trace a phone number to a student to avoid, any issues with IRB approval. But if we trace phone numbers, if we link phone numbers to names, then it becomes just much more paperwork. So we will have to hand out consent forms to get IRB approval and so on and so forth. It's just technically, I mean, it is definitely a very good suggestion, and we will look into it. But it's at the moment, it's just we haven't done it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duzhin, for your presentation again, and thank you for the floor for the questions and response. I think we can move on to our next section.